I met Gary probably 2 months ago on a different panel. Really liked what he was working on, and just started building a nice relationship. So in just a way of background, so I started my basically in banking, work with businesses, doing a lot of what we do, tech companies, and this was around 2002. Just learned a lot from that exposure. Then started thinking about how to make the transition from this medium-sized businesses to startup. Did that around 2006, 7. Learned a lot from just mentoring, advising. I'm a faculty at City College, so we have a Zon Innovation Center there. So I was over there mentoring different types of startup, including students and external startups. With that, I just started doing a lot of stuff, started investing my own money in different startups, and then basically launch a company in 2019. I think one of the things we're learning right now, why this is such an applicable thing to do in terms of communication. Gary mentioned it earlier in terms of the cycle we're in, which it is very important that we're communicating our message clearly to investors, stakeholders, employees, because the cycle for companies are going to take longer to raise capital. Therefore, you have to make sure that you're keeping your employees engaged and communicate that message. And so we're going to talk a lot about that and just try to dive deeper into that. Feel free to ask questions. Basically, we can just have a conversation while they're just either put in the chat or raise your hand. We can take questions about that. But let's start with some of the basic things that we're thinking of when we talk about communication. I think we all understand it basically, but why it's so prevalent today? And let's just start with even the investment cycle, since that's probably top of the mind for a lot of people that are trying to raise capital. I see a lot of people. I'm part of this organization called On Deck, basically, which is Beyond Deck, but they're On Deck, and it's ODA, On Deck Angels, On Deck Founders, all those things. And so people pitch us a lot. If you look at the community, it's pretty exclusive community that people send messages out. And one of the things that we always try to say in terms of email messages, in today's world, communication on the email side is very, very key, because we just came out of the pandemic, and I think a lot of people are still focused on sending emails out. But your emails are getting longer, and basically now is the time to get your email to the point, shorter, exactly what you're looking for in the communication, right? Who are you? How are you adding value? What are you building? Traction, all those sorts. So think of it as an elevator pitch, very short, to the point. And you can see some samples that are being sent out. I can share some with you. Basically, say if you can cut your email down to probably say half a page, if you think of a page or less, you can be the most effective communicator right there. So you're thinking of that stakeholder and do some homework. Like I just heard, I think it was Karen, if I remember so right, asking about where do you, and Gary just sent out 10 investors that focus on female founders. Those are the key that you want to do in today's world, right? Whatever your vertical is, you want to be researching who is investing in that space very well. And even better, if you can actually talk to some founders that are in their portfolio to see exactly what they're looking for, and then communicate that message in an email, just saying, hey, I would like to speak to you about what I'm building. Here are some tractions. Here's what we have done. If you have any investment, you have any stakeholder validation, just put that in, bullet points, highlights, bold where necessary, just to communicate those things. Those are what we're trying to think about right now in this communication space, to be effective when it comes on to trying to get investors to say, okay, I'm going to take a second look at this. Don't be random. Don't be, okay, just an email. No, be very specific about what you're doing, what you're building, why it makes sense, why your team is appropriate for building this thing, because that's what investors are looking for right now. They're basically trying to figure out, okay, if I'm going to make this investment, one, is there an validation? Is there an attraction? Because gone are the days where investors are making investment where there is no traction anymore. That's not going to happen. So you have to be real with that. So make sure you're highlighting those traction. Two, why your team? Why your team? Why are you guys good in this space to make this happen? So put those things in your email as much as you can, but keep it very short. And if you're talking to an investor, make sure that they have made some kind of investment in your space before. Because again, you're just wasting your time. They're not going to respond. So you want to make sure, just look, do the research before. Have they made an investment? Better yet, if you can reach out to a founder that's on their portfolio, that makes really, so you can even get a referral, even better. So you're trying to basically bring it from a cold call to at least a warm referral. But in the cases where it's cold, just keep that communication really short, really succinct, and just say, talk about what you have done, what you're doing, and how it makes sense for them to add value to their portfolio, because that's what they're looking for, right? Adding value to their portfolio. When we're thinking of the communication process, we're asking ourselves a couple of things, right? If it's a formal communication, like I said, basically, you know the person, you're sending them basically something is formal. Again, still, I have made the mistake to know VCs or investors and send them an email, not realizing that they're moving the cap from me knowing them as a friend to they being their business. So you have to recognize that, right? So if you're going to send an email, even if you know the person prior, just keep it formal in that space and that moment, where you're making sure that you're following the protocols in introducing yourself, talk about your company, tractions, validations, metrics that they want to hear, and last but not least, why your team is the right team to build it. One of the key factors you would probably learn, metrics. Just know what type of metrics they're looking for, because depending on where you are, if you're in the angel space, let's say you're pre-seed in the angel space, a lot of angel investors, they don't get caught up on a lot of the metrics that VC in particular look at. So you need to understand that very well. For angel investors, most of the things that they're looking for is they believe in you, and you're seeing some tractions. So know that and double down on that in your communication. And the VCs, they need more. They want you to take out some metrics. What are some key performance metrics? Whether it is EBITDA, whether it is net profit, whether it is enterprise value. So wherever you are in your company stage, know what investor you're talking to, because different ones will be a little bit more subjective to certain things. So with angels, they're usually open to just you telling them why you. Most of the time in that angel space, that pre-seed, they're actually betting on you. So if you can highlight some really good why you, then that makes sense. Why you're the make expert skill, why you're the team, or you're the person to build this thing. And then show them a few nice tractions that you have, which usually at this stage is not big, but it's detailed enough to make sure that they understand how are you going to get the venture fund. Because one thing you should recognize with a VC, with an angel job is to get you to the VC. If they can't figure out, oh, they're going to get you to a VC, they don't want to invest, because that's how they make money, right? So think of that, right? They have to get you to a VC, so at some point they can get to an exit. If they don't see that, they're not making that investment, unless it's friends and family, which is a different concept, right? So think of those things. And then when you get to the VC, it's a whole different deck. I usually tell people in the early stage, if you can potentially avoid a deck and use the executive summary, you find a lot more communication take place in the early stage. Or if you can supplement your deck with an executive summary. Again, pretty short, but reasonable enough to just highlight certain areas so they can basically just look at it. Because sometimes with the deck in the early stage, we don't have enough to say. We just don't have enough to say. And we want to say a little bit more so that they get to know you. So if you can move to an executive summary and just start highlighting certain things in that executive summary, you can write more and they can just follow along, which is really, really impactful in the communication stage. So any questions from anyone? All right, let's keep going. And then if you get a chance to, and you're one of the lucky few to get in front of the investors, let's talk about this verbal versus nonverbal communication. VCs are looking for any reason to say no right now. They know parameters have gone up and parameters have gone up exponentially. They're looking for any reason to say no. So again, that is the communication. Now it's verbal, and the non-communication cues, right? Is this person really interested in building this thing? So if you're in the meeting, get a Zoom call, make sure that they understand that you're passionate about this thing. You really believe this thing can change the world. The magnitude of this thing is going to drive that, because they're listening for those cues. They don't want to get off the phone feeling like they were, or the video conference, that they were more interested in the project than you were. And equally important, if you can bring a team member with you, that'd be great, because again, they're looking for that. All right. If you're building a technical company, there's a 99% chance that you must highlight that you have a technical lead. Those things are quite imperative in this communication. So if you can bring a technical lead with you in the conversation so that they can talk about certain things as it relates to the technical state, that also moves you further in the conversation. Again, just thinking about those things, right? So all in all, and last but not least in the communication is your response to a potential investor or investor. Or even better if you have more than one. Even if you think this investor is likely not to invest in the next round, if they show interest, you should add them to an email list where you're going to send out a communication at least once per quarter. And you're going to communicate with these people quarterly, preferably, because you're trying to raise money. If you can do it monthly, even awesome, but I know that's a lot to ask, but at least quarterly, where you are basically, again, listing all updates that has happened over the last couple of things. And even better, if something great has happened, like you've gotten a customer, make sure. So, and also ask for things, right? These are the time to ask, right? You're writing this and you say, okay, one, here's what we have done last month. Two, here's some new metrics. Three, we're looking for so and so and so. You'll be surprised in that a VC might be there who is potentially have invested, or angel. Like for example, the on-deck communities, we're full of operator angels. Most of the angels inside there are operator angels. So they're build companies and they can help you with all of things. So you'll be surprised that something they might say, oh, you're looking for so and so, I can help with that.
So you guys see, Glenn, thank you. This is what we talk about every day in our session, that you got to do an investor newsletter. You got to ask for things. You got to update people. So now Glenn's talking about, this is not scripted, by the way. I did not know what he was going to talk about. And this is exactly what we preach. So thank you, Glenn. Sure. Everybody, make sure you do your investor newsletters.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you have investors currently, they take priority. But if you're spoken to an investor or a VC and they're showing interest, add them to that list so that they're updated at least quarterly, so you can move that along. So again, just don't be afraid to do those communication things, because that's what we do as founders, right? Our job is to make investors. We're trying to de-risk our enterprise, and the more information you can give them to do that, the more likely you're going to get the investment. So that's basically where we are. So again, you can keep that newsletter pretty short. I would say at your stage, basically a page is okay, but if you have more to say it. Just look for it, and just if you have more to say. So again, I love what Gary did earlier, where he picked up a stack of 10 investors and just say, take a look at this. That's key. The minute you decide to start the investment cycle, that's the first thing you should do. Create an Excel sheet, and every single company that have invested in a company that looks like yours, just start populating it. And from there, just start sending them information and know what stage they're investing. Know what stage they're investing. If you're in pre-seed and you're sending it to a Series A investor, they're not going to communicate with you. They're not going to talk to you. They're not going to talk to you. So if you're not sure, like I said earlier, reach out to one of the founders and just ask, like, hey, I noticed you have gotten investment from so and so and so. Can you tell me what stage he or she invested in? You know, what did you like? What did you not like? What do you think are best practice I can use to get in? So feel okay with asking for those referrals and those feedback from other founders that they may have invested. So it makes your life easier in this communication things. And again, and that's your role. So that's your role as a founder. Any question about investment piece before we move on? Okay, great.
Hi,
So
Glenn.
guys, don't be afraid to ask questions. Come on. Jesse's got one, maybe.
Hi, Glenn. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, cool. Awesome. My name is Jesse. I run a income and expense management tool for startups in Africa. And you mentioned something that that I have a question on, which was have your technical lead in the meeting. So I studied computer science and I'm a software engineer, and I built the beta version of the application. However, I do have a tech lead at this moment. So do I still have to bring the person on board in meetings, or can I just continue as, because I do understand the technology?
That's a good question. No, you understand the technology. So preface what I said. If you're a founder, you're not a technical. That's a great question. If you're not a technical lead, if you don't understand the computer piece of it, you're not a tech person. Then you bring that. But if you are, you don't have to. If you understand your computer science, again, remember what I said: domain expert skills, right? So in that deck or that executive summary, you're going to list your skill sets, right? So you're going to say, I'm computer science major, this. So they get it. They understand that you know it. What they're looking for is that somebody is there. But again, you would also highlight that you do have a technical lead as well. So that person doesn't need to show up to the meeting because you understand. So make sure that you understand the whole thing so you can answer questions if it comes up. That's basically what it is. Because at some level, if they start diving deep into these technical questions, you should know that their interest is peaked, right? If they move from just asking you about, how many clients you have last year to about the technical stack, then you need to understand the technical stack. So if you understand it, great. No need for the technical lead to come in. You can do it yourself.
All right, cool. Thanks a lot.
Sure.
Hi there, this is Sanjay, founder of Runday, a conversational AI for your calendar. You mentioned kind of using an executive summary instead of a full deck. How do you feel about using either short form videos or perhaps even letting them, use your product as an alternative to like doing a deck, like having them adopt or videos or the executive summary kind of option at first?
Very good question. But ideally, remember what the email is for basically is usually to get the meeting. If you get the meeting, great. Add a video. You can do that, right? If someone has said, hey, listen, I want to learn more, send the video. So it's all about the communication process, right? If someone said, hey, I love your email, thanks for sending the email, really love to hear more, yeah, why not? Share the video. Basically, because a lot of times you send that email, I see people send me email, right? Cold call, and they attach the email and all these things, and I just don't read it, right? It's not of interest to me, so I'm not going to read it. So focus on getting this meeting. Focus on them saying, hey, I really like this. I would like to learn more. That's your cue to send the video.
Gotcha.
That's your cue to send the video and say, okay, yeah, sure. I'll give them again more information. Here's a video you can look. Love to have a call with you. at a convenient time, things like that. But that's the time to send the video. If you send the video in that email and it really is not the right VC, listen, angel investors, VC that are doing this, Gary probably can tell you, Nick can tell you, most of the time we just see it and just don't read it anymore. Like the first line is enough to just like, okay, I'm not reading anymore. So the key is to make sure that you're getting their attention from the first line. That email is you trying to get that meeting or for them to give you a response. Because once they give you a response, wow, like I would like to learn more, or oh, this looks good. I really enjoy. Then that's your cue to say, okay, thank you so much. Here's providing more information, all those things. And that's when I would send it. Personally, me, that's when I would send the video.
Okay, thank you.
Looks like Enzo's got a question as well. Enzo, what's going on?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Thank you also for the presentation. So Glenn, yes, I'm finance manager at Africa Green Tech. We are raising our Series B now. We started with a pitch deck with about 45 slides. We even have like a second pitch deck when we enter deeper talks with potential investors. And now we are setting up this investment teaser with about 12 slides. My question is, what would be the advice, the content we need to disclose? Because raising Series B, meaning that we have to show a lot of traction, we have to show our numbers, many different things. And sometimes I think we struggle to go to the essential. So what would you advise us, or what would you advise companies that are raising Series B? What is the most important content to show and disclose to investors? Hope it's clear.
Sure. And so you're raising a Series B, you said?
Yes.
Okay. To me, that's I don't want to be right, but that's easy. That should be easy. Why is it easy at the Series B? You have already demonstrated significant traction to be able to get a Series A, right? So all you're doing is basically adding to the traction that you have done. I think I probably can find it, but if you look at most of the companies that are raising Series B, they're not sending more than four slides.
Okay.
You probably don't even need to go 12. They're not sending more than 4 or 5 slides because you're supposed to have a lead investor coming back from the Series A. If you're not having an investor coming back from the Series A, you're in a serious problem. There's not one single investor is going to look at you. So make sure that the first people you're talking to is the people who invest in your Series A, because if they're not coming back to the Series B, that's going to be a problem. So I would communicate with them first, let them know, especially the lead investor that invested in Series A, if they're competent, if their fund is investing at Series B, which again, there's a 50% chance that they will invest at Series B, but you might want different investors, right? You might want a different lead investor too, that's personal for you, but make sure that at least you're going to have the signal investors in Series A either participate in Series B or be there to support your cause going to the Series B. Because lots of these investors are going to ask you, and I can tell you right away, if they haven't asked you yet, who is participating from your last round? Because they want to know that. Because if nobody's participating, then
I think you're totally right. So the small precision I should have said is that we raised a lot during our Series A with crowd investing. So most of the people that invested via crowd investing in Series A might come back for the Series B. Of course, we reached out to the big investors, to the lead investors of the Series A, and we hope to get them on board for the Series B. But yeah, now we raise a different amount of money, and we also want different investors. But very interesting. I wouldn't imagine that they would need only 4 slides to get the updates. So yeah, very valuable feedback. Thank you very much, Glenn.
Okay, Enzo. Thanks for some clarification, because that's different. What you're saying is that you raise the Series A from crowdfunding.
Mostly, yes.
Mostly, yes. So that's slightly different, because what you want to do in that case is separate the people who are in the crowdfunding from the actual people who were on the cap table.
Exactly. That's what we try to do.
Yes. So separate those two and focus only on the people that are on your cap table. Because to an investor in the Series B, they, believe it or not, they're more concerned with the people who are on the cap table than the crowdfunding round. So challenges here, which probably this is not the right conversation for it, but I'll just do it. Challenges here, and that probably for a different conversation. So, and you probably have heard this, you probably noticed yourself. When you start getting to that Series B and over, and you do a lot of crowdfunding, investors are a little bit, they just don't like to have a lot of people in the cap table. So hopefully your crowdfunding people are in a special purpose vehicle. So that special purpose represent one, because they don't like a lot of people on the cap table. So that's a big turnoff to a lot of investors. So your job is going to be key in terms of communicating. Basically, if you have a lot of people on your cap table that came through, because I think it's prior to last year or the year before, during a crowdfunding round, I can probably look it up, you can look at this up, you have to include all those people on your cap table as opposed to putting them in a special purpose vehicle. So the special purpose vehicle represent one entity on your cap table, basically. So for you, if you have a lot of people on your cap table because they came through a crowdfunding, you're going to have to do a really good communication to explain to them why. Again, make sure you're detailing this. I would start with that. Basically, if that's the case, like really tell them that we did a crowdfunding round, these people are on the crowdfunding round, and then separate the people who actually invested on your on the cap table, basically. So if you have 5 or 6 investors that were on the cap table and one was the lead, I would actually just take up those 5 and communicate with them to see if there's anyone coming back for the Series B. And in this case, I apologize, but in this case, I would probably do a 12 slide deck, because I think you're going to have to show this the Series B guys then a lot of information as to why you couldn't close the round without crowdfunding. Listen, we know crowdfunding is a good way to get traction, basically, and I look at this as a great way to even get customers. But from an investment standpoint, investors just, I don't know what is their, Barry can tell us more. They're paranoid with the idea of having so many people on the cap table. And a lot of it comes from different things that we can talk about, like carry along. You might have one person decide not to allow the investors to invest in the next round. So there are a lot of things that they're worried about. So your job is going to be able to communicate this really effectively if all those people are on your cap table. I don't know what a cap table look like. I'm just pointing out the pros and cons here. So yes, you're going to have to communicate. So let me take that back. I thought you just had a straight Series A. If you have crowdfunding, yes, I'll probably create, you're right. I'll probably go with a lot of slides on it, and I will really dive down into the metrics that separate me, why I had to go to a crowdfunding round to close the deal, as to what has happened since, why I don't need that crowdfunding round or what. And I wouldn't even be surprised if they basically want you to even dive deeper into find a way if you have any side letter with any of them, because sometimes people give people side letters for certain things. So yes, that's going to be a good for you, a more communication. I would actually, they might even ask you for side letters too. I don't know if you gave any side letters to somebody to get a participate in the next round, all those things. So Series B investors, you're going to have to communicate pretty well with them. So I apologize. Let me take that back. I didn't hear that piece where you said first about the crowdfunding. Not sure if you said that and I missed it. But if you include the crowdfunding in it, that becomes a little bit more tricky in the communication, because you're talking about lots of customers. And I really hope that you're not on your cap table and you were able to create a special purpose vehicle that includes just one, because that way you don't have to go through this whole communication process.
Thank you, Glenn.
Okay.
Yeah, totally makes sense.
Any other questions? All right, so that's from the investor standpoint in terms of the communication, basically. Let's talk about your communication with your team. A lot of what you're going to have to do now is a lot of coaching. Not sure how big your team is prior to what's going on in the economy right now. If you have to fire some people, restructure certain things to basically terminate people, so a lot of it is now coaching. Communication is clear. You really don't want your team to be learning about news from LinkedIn or Twitter. You want to be the person giving them this information as it arrives, basically. So you want to be able to be that person. So communication is going to be paramount for you, either using, I don't know if you're using Slack, if you're using email, but preferably a channel like Slack would be great for just be communicating with your team. And then a lot of coaching, because you're hitting certain metrics now and you want to basically just talk to your team and coach people as to exactly what's it. So you're differentiating yourself now from a coach and a counselor with your team. Like you're there and you're trying to help them to weather the storm with you through this crisis, because everybody's reading the news. We're in a recession, or a recession is coming. I know they're not going to raise money, or no. So you have to reassure them that what you're building, A, it's long term. B, if you're making money, great. You can demonstrate that you're making money. If you're not making money and it's really new, lots of coaching. Like, here's where we want to get to by December. Like, set clear metrics for them, clear milestones for the team. Now, here's where we want to get to. If you're not using some tools like Jira, I would say start using a tool like that, project management tool, really good communication tool, right? So they start detailing every single thing in it and having clear milestones. So we would like to get to this number by, say, end of Q4 this year, this number by Q1 next year. So they can actually see what type of progress you will make, as opposed to sitting down just trying to understand where you're going to be and whether or not they should stay, because you're going to start losing valuable people at this point in time if you're not doing it. So you want to start doing those type of communication with your team right now. Just basically make it, if you don't have a Slack channel, I would say create one so your team feels like they're in one space, because they're inside of this Slack channel, so they can communicate with each other. Basically, if you're in person and everybody is in person, great, wonderful. Then you have a space where you can actually work out of. But if you're not and you're working remote 100%, I would say create a Slack channel. And also, I would actually create like a once a month in-person meeting. If that's possible, at least for the people who are close by, just to bring together a communication so you can talk to people, highlight certain progress, all those things. So keep your team motivated. Communication is going to be key. Even if you feel like you're key people, you should probably just tell them about what's going on with funding. You should probably tell them, especially your key people, if you want to keep them. Just start talking to them about funding process. Hey, listen, so we are going to talk to some investors next week. So it's very key for you guys to communicate and become more of a coach in this process to get them to move from one space to the next. Question? Wonderful. So ideally, your job as a CEO is to start thinking through this process, right? You're the founder. You're there. You're doing everything, but don't ignore the team at this point in time. I get that you want to raise capital. You're feeling pressure to raise capital, but I think you have to stop and ask yourself and just be realistic that if you were thinking of a funding cycle between 3 and 6 months, you probably want to extend it for the next 3 months and just be realistic about what's happening, and then be realistic and talk to your team consistently about don't be afraid to talk to them. Hey, listen, we're going through economic cycle right now. And if you need to lay off somebody and people see that you're laying off people, they're going to be worried. So tell them why. Like, let them know why we have to downsize a bit to get through this financial crisis. So key to just communicate. Don't just email them and just like, no, bring them into a Slack channel. Bring them into a space where you can have a conversation with them. Set up a Zoom meeting with them. But don't just email and just like, no, it's not going to work. Bring them into a Zoom session in person if it's possible. Really would absolutely 100% think if that's a possibility, you should do it. And from there, that's equally important for you to just try to understand where you're going. So again, we're talking about the whole stakeholders right here, right? We start with investors, and then we're moving to what I think is a key part of how you're going to survive this process, your employees. So again, be mindful. Even if it's 4 of you and you're all founders, wonderful. Start talking to each other pretty regularly. Don't take one for granted. Like, just really start talking to each other about what's going on. Basically, if there's one thing we learned about COVID-19 is how to communicate effectively through other means, right? Other than in person. So we're back in a stage where we have to utilize those communication, all of it now. We have the ability now to use in-person and remote and use all of it effectively now, because we're going through a financial crisis where a lot of people are just sitting there saying, oh, wow, we can't survive this. And it's just always in the news. Whether it's real or it's not real, it's just always in the news and it's top of the mind. So you want to be the person giving that news. You don't want them to be reading it on LinkedIn or some crazy place, Twitter, because they're there, or Facebook. You want to be consistently talking to them. Like I said, we're necessary. If you can go out and get lunch and sit down and talk, have a team meeting and just have a conversation. And equally important, if you can set up some, I call them like mastermind groups. If you can set up some mastermind groups where in these groups people are sharing situation that you're thinking about, so they're basically, they might find that they're working too many hours, or they might find that they don't see why they're doing something. That's where you're going to talk about, or there's something going on at home why they can't get to work early. So having these really good sessions where people are just having an open discussion, and even equally important, I would say, if the CEO or the founders don't even join those meetings sometimes, it's great because it's allowed them to just talk without feeling, oh, if I say something, I might get fired. So you have to be willing to not penalize these people in this process, because if you do, then it's going to move to the grapevine, and you want the grapevine to be your word of words, right? You don't want them to be, talking to someone else, and then the whole thing is being spread around it without you knowing what's going on, and you're just going to feel out of touch, right? As founders, make sure on the same page. This is the moment where you're talking to each other, because it goes two ways, right? The employees is going to notice it and feel it, and the investors are going to notice and feel it too, right? So you walk into an investor meeting, and for some reason you're not on the same page. Somebody wants to leave, somebody don't like what's going on, somebody feel like they need to go home and take care of their family. You walk into an investor meeting, and believe it or not, the investors notice it. On the other hand, the employees notice it. So your job is to make sure that as founders, you are now communicating with each other, tracking milestone, talking to milestone, asking questions, and then reach out to the team member and say, okay, what can we do better? Let's say, for example, you're trying to get more customers, and you find that there's something going on why you're not getting customers. People can give some ideas, right? You probably just say off the top of your head, oh, well, it's because of the economy. Nobody is buying. No, you're a founder. You got into this for a 10, 15-year, 20-year journey and more, not for today. So the economy is just one thing. You're going to get through it. So talk to your team, because they might have something going on that they can can highlight something, so share with them so they can see. Say, listen, basically we found that we're decreasing clients. Can we discuss why? What are we not looking at? And talk to them. And just in rare cases, you can mention the economy, basically, but don't make it look like this is something that's going to kill your business. Just say, this is the next challenge that we have to get past. So the way you communicate these things is very, very important for you. And then you as a founder have to come to work every day looking chirpy. And when you're not, just stay outside until you feel like you can go inside, you're feeling chirpy, right? That's your job. Because you're a coach now, you're a motivator in these times. Any questions?
Hey, Glenn, it's Vivek from Simply Capital. So I just want to go back to your investor communication part. So I'm probably on the other end of the spectrum where I'm a pre-revenue company. And so I released my MVP at the end of August. In September, we got our first customer. We signed a couple of letter of intents, and we also signed a couple of partnerships. So, I mean, there's traction, but not really that much, right? So in terms of communicating to investors, what do you think is going to catch their eye? Because, I mean, I have all variations. I have a 1-pager, 4-pager, 10-pager, 20-pager. So what do you think is going to catch their eye?
No, that's good, by the way. Congrats, gaining some tractions. That's wonderful. Customers are always great. Partnership is always great. I think the thing you should know and hold on to is that you're at the stage you're in the best stage of the business right now. Most people don't even recognize that you are in the best stage of the business right now, because what's going to happen is that we will walk out of the people who are really afraid right now are Series D and above, because this is a stage where failure is very, very high. And investors are really tentative to make the investment because they want to know your burn rate. They want to know so many things about you at this point in time, because you have to rev up your burn rate so much to keep up with the metrics for the valuation. But where you are, you're in a perfect place, just starting out. It's like the beautiful place. You just started, you get your MVP out, you have some customers. This is the time investors want to talk to you. So I would focus on angel investors. Basically, I wouldn't talk to the VCs right now. I would keep them if I have them, I know them. And angel investor and potentially micro VCs. There are a few micro VCs out there. That's what I would target right now, basically. And drive down, double down, like highlight these tractions that you're just showing us, talking about. Let them see that, like A, B, C. Here we are. We have done this over 3 months. We have done this over 2 months. And where that's not necessary, now is a great time to target the accelerator programs. Techstars, YCOM, now is the time to really drive them, right? A lot of places, especially YC, and most of you have seen it, they really want to see that traction, but they want to see you. YC is a founder's place. They love investing in founders. They want to know that you are larger than life. You are going to change the world in the next 2 or 3. So whatever your communication message is to YC is how great you are and how great your company is going to be changing the world, changing this vertical. That basically. So think about those things, because you're in the right space. It's easy for investors to make the investment for you, because they know that you have a long runway before you're in problem. And by then, I would say 6-9 months, we're recovering out of this thing. And that's great for you, because you're walking into your Series A or seed round, right, and you're back, right? And also you come in at a better valuation too. Because a lot of what's going on now is that the valuations are so high that the investors don't want to invest at that valuation. So it's hard for people to communicate why, and nobody wants to take a down round. So they're just like, you know what? I guarantee you this, most of you recognize this. Figma wouldn't even sell themselves to Adobe if it wasn't this climate. They would just write it out and go public. But of course, why would they take the risk? At 20, you're doubling my valuation, 20 bill. Why not? Just, it's going to be hard for me to get around. And I'm certain they probably reach out to some investor, not knowing. I don't want to say I know, but they probably reach out to investors, and the investor said, no, we're not going to do this. Because why? Not because the investors don't like them, it's just too expensive.
Right.
Just too expensive. So you're in the perfect space. So I would basically sit down with those validation and traction that you just mentioned and just highlight those. Highlight those. Bold, highlight, make those. And just look out for companies that are in your space, basically, and just say, okay, I'm going to target them, angel and companies. And just send emails. Listen, send me an email. Fine. Send me an email with basically what you're doing, what you're building, who is it. Let me take a look at it. If it makes sense to my community, I'll share it. Makes sense to my community. Just find people, because people send me health tech all the time. And I said to people, I'm going to be honest with you guys, I have no idea how to do health tech. It's not me. I don't know. So I don't know. So I just tell people, doesn't make any sense you send it to me, because I'm not going to be able to help you. Right? So try to figure out who can help you in the space you are and just send it out to them. Where necessary, like we're having a conversation now, you can send it to me, and doesn't matter what it is, if I look at it and I feel like it fits in a community, I'll just share it again. But that's where you want to be if you have interaction, right? I just got about 6 companies yesterday from YC, basically. And a lot of companies were pretty early like you, but they have some good tractions. Good tractions going down the line, right? So that's what you want to show, some good tractions down the line, so people can see, okay, fine. And last but not least, basically, enterprises people still like it, right? SaaS model, enterprise model. If you're there, people still like those things, basically, because again, you can drive revenue without investors. So those are the ways you have to think about it. But I would definitely do a lot of outreach to the angel community and microphone.
Got it. Thanks, Glenn.
Sure.
Yeah, but I want to say one thing. This is Gary. Glenn made a great point. One thing you do, I know we've got people from all over the world here, but so in some cultures, they're kind of modest and they say, oh, I don't know, maybe it'll work, or they have some doubt. Literally with the investors, you want to make sure that you believe that you can do it, because they're not going to invest. I wouldn't invest my money in a company that I think that they're saying so-so or maybe or whatever. Make sure that you're very much in the affirmative, that you can pull it off, and you truly believe you can pull it off. So that's the soft side of startups. And I've had thousands of companies through my accelerator in Eastern Europe. And the soft side of it is really important. In fact, it's probably, in my opinion, 70-75% of getting money closed. Who you are, do they like you? Do you like your team? And they believe that you can pull it off. And by the way, we raised money, just FYI. So in 2000, many years ago, many moons ago, there was the dot-com bubble burst. People told us we could not do an IPO. It wasn't going to work, that we needed to hold off, and we did one. So March, the meltdown started. In June, we did an IPO on NASDAQ. That company sold for $1.35 billion to Salesforce. So when people tell you can't do stuff, let me tell you, you can. I raised $7 million in 4 months. And people told me that was impossible. We had no traction in California 6 years ago, and sold the company to Vizier in Canada. So, I mean, you can do it.
No, that's great, Gary. Thanks for sharing that. Like I said to you guys, I met Gary and look at the stuff he was doing. And if you're not motivated working with Gary, then this is not going to happen. So you basically, that's true, right? In every single, I remember in 2008, Sequoia sent out a letter that they shared recently with this downturn to their founders. And it was the same thing they're saying, basically. And those companies went on to be staple companies we're looking, Notable, Snap, all those companies, right? So there's always going to be economic cycle. And by the way, based on data, it has shown that good companies are usually start out of these economic downturns, right? 2008, they show you that 2008, and I'm certain it will happen again now. So why not you? And the key is just communicating your metrics and your focus continuously, right? Just communicating. Again, be very, very detailed and determined, right? Just do some research. If you're going to raise capital, do some research. Any other questions? All right. So just to I don't know how much time I have.
Can you do me a favor? You got your own personal story about it. So I don't know, I didn't hear the part where you talked about yourself being an investor, but the kind of things that you invest in and what you're passionate about.
Oh yeah, no, great. No, thank you. Yeah, that's a good question. So I basically made my first investment in 2017, partly because the founder was really, really, really powerful. Like I was running a Harlem Tech Summit. It was one of the first tech summits in Harlem. And I met this person at it. And he was so unique. He wrote a book about breaking into venture. And he was really smart, really, really smart young man. And that's what I'm talking about, right? He was pretty articulate. He was pretty smart. And I'm listening to him and then after the summit, about a week or two later, he sent me this really articulate email. He's thinking about building this company. What would this company do? How this company would change it? And the following week, he sent an email. I said, "Oh, I got into Techstar, not the Techstar Accelerator, but Techstar actually recruited him to be an entrepreneur in residence so he could build a company. The idea, not the company, the idea that he was talking about, right? And when he sent me he didn't even send me a deck. Again, like I said, just sent me the email. He got on the phone and I'm talking to him. And is what we think of today is Web 3.0. But his idea was that with this cryptocurrency, Ether, and I'm an investor. I started investing in crypto in 2016. I think I bought my first Bitcoin. So I really believe that's the space. Blockchain, I love the first time I see it. I said, this is massive disruption for our world, right? And he had this thesis that social money will change the way celebrities and influencers interact with their followers. And I'm sitting there saying, whoa, that makes sense. I can't see where it's going to go, like we couldn't see where Facebook is going to go, but we know it makes sense, right? And I said, you know what? I'm in. And I invested. I was probably myself, Techstar, Gary Vaynerchuk, we were in the first 10 investors. Just like that. I was just like, wow, right? So that's how you want to captivate your investor. You want them to see how you're differentiating the world.
Yeah, but you didn't just invest in that investment. You've invested in a number of investments. So.
Afterwards, I invested in next one. Like I met this young lady. Right? Yeah, I met this young lady. Christina. I was at a 500 startup when 500 startup was 500 startup back at a meeting, and she came up to me and she said, "Oh, you know, I went to Columbia University grad school," and she said, "Oh, did you?" Say, "Yeah." And she started talking to me. She's building this entity which basically is giving. She wants to give people who are artists and all those things a platform where they can actually. Now she's doing NFT, I said, but back then there was no such thing as NFT. Where she can give them a platform where they can find jobs and I, you know, and at first I was listening to it and I said, I have no business in this space. I didn't say anything to her, but she emailed me back very, very, you know, eloquently, just articulating her vision. And I said, you know what? All right, let's meet again. Those are the days when we're doing all in person, right? So I went and I met with her in the city and she, you know, talked to me about it. And I said, you know what? Definitely. And like I said, for me, I want to believe in the founder. I want to see that this founder is going to move whatever they need to move to bring this thing to market, right? Pivot where they need to pivot. If you look at the most successful entities, it's not because their idea was right in the beginning. It's because they were willing to hustle, work hard, fight, pivot, iterate to make sure this thing become a success. I remember listening to Airbnb founder, what's his name? He left now, but he was talking and he said they did not know how to monetize what they were doing with Airbnb at first. They were going to give up. They were like, I'm done. This doesn't even make any sense. One of their angel investor, which is why angel investors are good, right? Because we're the ones that point in the places that you need to go to, said, why don't you join Y Combinator? And they're like, okay, all right, fine. Got there for a join Y Combinator, got into Y Combinator. Y Combinator helped them restructure what they have to do as Airbnb because they weren't thinking of Airbnb. They were thinking about creating their architects. So they were thinking about building small places. Wouldn't work. It was just too hard to scale up. But they changed it to the Airbnb where we are and define a marketplace that never existed. And that's Airbnb today. So that's what we're looking for founders. Are you coachable? Are you willing to pivot? Are you willing to iterate? Are you determined to know that this is not working and I'm going to change? Your customer is not the right customer. So those are the things that I listen to for in the early stage. I don't care if you're not making the money. But if you're telling me, no, I'm right on this and this is going to be, I'm worried. I'm very worried. But if you're sitting there saying, I am testing this user to see if this is the right thing, that's what I want to hear. Because I want to know, are you willing to see that this is not working and iterate to a different customer segment or something like that, or a different model? So you have to be willing to do those things. And that's what drives me. By the way, I really just follow the YCOM model. You know, sometimes we just follow certain things and that's how they behave. So I just said, okay, fine, you know what? Why not? And it works. I'm going to be honest with you. It really works. So I've done about 5 or 6 investments so far. And each one of them is always about the founder and the team. Like I'm sitting there. My blind spot is I don't know how to invest in single entity. I can't invest into single founders. I have no idea how to do it. Like to me, it's just too difficult to build a tech startup for you alone to do it. So I always could be a blind spot. I'm not lying. It could be a blind spot, right? Because there might be a great single founder out there that I miss, but I'm going to miss it because I can't do it. And some people are going to do that, right? So I'm looking at who is coming along. How can you build a team? How can you get a team to join you? All those things as a founder, because if you can convince people to join your idea, you have a great chance of convincing investors to invest as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.